So today we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Tobi and Tomi Arayomi. Guys, how you doing?
We're doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. Now, thank you so much for joining us. You guys, we've been following you on Revelation TV for a while now. Our viewers are familiar with you. But for any of the new viewers out there who are seeing you guys for the very first time, give us a little insight into your background.
Well, I'm Tomi. This is my twin brother, Tobi. And we both, we're both full-time ministers serving the Lord, preaching, traveling, believing God for revival everywhere we go. We started ministry when we were 15 years old. Our first actual interview was on television. Our first ministry engagement was on Revelation TV. So it's kind of ironic that we're back here continuing that legacy. And we've been grateful for Revelation since we started, because it really was a door opener for us. And talk about taking the training wheels off and just going head over heels right for it. And since then, we just never stopped. We just keep loving, serving, and growing in the Lord.
Well, we really started at the age of 15, and we came to the Lord actually through an experience where we had lost our entire belongings in our house. Our family went on vacation to Florida, and our house was completely burgled by the time we came back. And when we came back, I made a prayer, and my prayer went something like this: God, if you're real, you need to show yourself to me. Middle of the night, I have this dream, and in this dream, I'm crawling literally through a small hatch in my house. And when I get to the other side, I see chairs as far as your eyes can see, and people are shouting out, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Now, shamefully, I wanted to be a rap star. There's still blackmail material out there somewhere, me and my brother rapping. So I was wondering, why aren't they saying, Tobi, Tobi, Tobi? And in this dream, a voice came and said, this is what I've called you to do. I woke up from the dream, and immediately I woke up, I saw my brother had woken up at exactly the same time. And I said, Tomi, what happened to you? And my brother said?
And I said, hey, I had a dream. I crawled through a hatch in my house. I came out the other side. I'm standing on a stage, and it seems like I'm speaking, and everybody's going, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I was angry. Why aren't they saying my name? Because I wanted to be a rap star, and shamefully, there is some material out there on us, and we hope you never find it. But it turned out that we looked at each other, and we had had the exact same dream at the exact same time. And it was then that my brother started to surrender his heart to Christ more and more straight away. But I was a little bit more rebellious coming into Christ. My brother grew less popular, but more people got saved in the schools. We went from school to school. My brother went ministering, teaching, and I grew more popular, but probably a lot less focused in education. It wasn't until one day I got really jealous of my brother, and I asked the girl that actually preached to him to come and preach to me, not so I can receive Christ, just so my grace can improve. And this lady is telling me about Christ. She probably thought, now finally I've got the heathen where I need him. And she's talking, she's preaching, and nothing is going in. It's all bouncing off, and she can tell. She gets frustrated. She looks at me, she goes, right, you're not listening to me. God's going to show you himself. That night I'm driving. I'm in the car with my parents who are driving. My dad's driving, my mom, my sister, my brother, and me in the back seat of the car. And everyone's asleep except for my dad, who's obviously driving. And I hear a voice, and it says, Tomi. And the voice sounded like my dad. It was so audible, so clear. It sounded like my dad, but my eyes were closed. I wasn't paying any attention, because if an African parent wakes you up, it's to ask you, how's your school, how's your grades, and are you focusing? In that order. And so I pretended to be asleep. Then a white light came over my eyes and blinded me for a couple of seconds. I opened my eyes, I looked, and I called my dad. I said, Dad, did you call me? And my dad said, no. I said, Dad, I know you called me, I heard you. You said I didn't call you. I said, then, Dad, what is this flash? Did you get hit by a traffic camera? And my dad said, no, I didn't. I immediately was about to go back to sleep, and I heard the voice again, Tomi, audibly in my ears. I said, "Who is this?" He said, "This is Jesus." He said, "You were supposed to die today, but I'm going to save your life, and I'm going to call you into the ministry." All of a sudden, my parents, the Lord told me, "Wake your parents up, wake everybody up. Tell them to put their seatbelts on." I woke everybody up and said, "Everybody put your seatbelts on." I don't know why. Just do it, and everybody did it. And the voice yelled, "Now yell at the top of your lungs, watch out." And at the top of my lungs, I yelled, "Watch out." My dad, startled by my scream, switched lanes instantly into the middle lane. The lane we had just departed, 5 cars just crashed into each other, including a police car, and we missed it by a fraction of a second. And I was in the back seat of a car that I surrendered my heart to Jesus Christ.
Tell us how your life has transformed. I mean, you said you came to Christ from the age of 15. Explain the difference between from before you came to Christ, before the age of 15 to after. How can you compare both of those experiences?
Tweedledee and Tweedledum. that's what people used to call us, literally. Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You can guess, I'll leave it for you to guess which one of us was Tweedledum. So we again, when Christ comes into your life, you know something. They used to say in the Bible, they'll say something whenever they'd encounter Jesus, "I was blind, but now I see." There always seemed to be a before and after. For me and my brother, and a lot of our experiences were shared. There were some individual experiences, but I can talk about some of the shared ones. We were always in hospital. And it was for different things, that complications that doctors just couldn't tell what was happening with our lungs. And they called it asthma, but wheezing cough, they gave it so many different names, but we would literally lose breath and almost pass out, be sent to hospital. We knew every ambulance driver's name. That's how bad it got. Then we were also severely, it wasn't diagnosed, but looking back, we were severely dyslexic. We and probably had ADHD and every other label you can imagine. We just could not focus in school, couldn't listen to what was being said, so hyperactive. I used to tell people, if I think about my life before I knew God, I always wonder who was in control of my body. Because I don't actually remember being responsible or in control of my choices. I just remember just doing anything that came into my head. And it could be the most ridiculous things, the stupidest things. We were just constantly in trouble. So there was health issues, and there was also always emotional issues. Now, when we came to Christ, I didn't even know this happened, but all of a sudden I haven't been to a hospital for anything serious since. Healed completely of asthma or whatever that issue was. Walking in supernatural excellence, to where, again, teachers used to tell my parents, "Listen, don't set these guys up, don't send them to university, don't let them be disappointed, just let them leave school now." When I told my teacher I wanted to study law, she and the entire class laughed hysterically to the point that they were almost bowling over. But the Spirit of God, if he can give people in the New Testament a language that they've never heard and they can speak it fluently, he can supernaturally give your brain excellence and heal it. And he supernaturally healed my mind to the point, went to law, finished law school, running churches, running our own businesses as well. And I think the greatest thing that God healed us from, and this is, this is a spirit that many people walk in, unfortunately, but I'll say it, I think God healed us both from the spirit of stupid. Because, I always tell people there are only 2 races of people in God's eyes. There's not black, white, Indian, or whatever. There's only 2 races of people in God's eyes. It's the sheep or the goats. Yeah. And the sheep and the goats are the wise or the foolish. Those are the only 2 races that exist on earth. You're either wise or you're foolish. And I think that's one of the greatest testimonies, that God gave us wisdom to make better, greater choices and to see a better quality life as well.
What advice would you give to anyone out there who's watching, maybe a young person who's watching and they've been told they're dyslexic, or they've been labelled and they've got ADHD or any other symptom, for example? maybe they might feel restricted, maybe they feel they can't quite achieve what they want to achieve in life. What sort of advice, you've gone through this, what advice would you give to them right now?
Change the label. I mean, that's the best advice I can give anybody. Change the label. Before anybody can identify or tell you who you are, we have to go back to the original manual writer for our entire lives, and that is God. And he said in Genesis 1:26, let's make man in our image and after our likeness. And so often what we try to do is I think there's a generation that's been so labeled. You know, they've been called dyslexic, they've been called anorexic, they've been called bulimic, they've been titled and tagged with everything, even millennial. You know, even that term has kind of brought with it the stigma of this indentured, entitled generation who lives in their parents' basement and are so far-fetched in their expectations. No, we have to return back to the original manual writer for our entire lives, and that is God. And if he's not any of those things, then we have to address, do we want to change who that image is, or do we want to change who we are? So many people change the question to suit the answer. You know, they change who God is to suit where they are. You know, the Bible says that we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God, but thank God through Jesus Christ, we can come back to that mirror, we can come back to that image, and we can adjust ourselves to line up with that with that image of how he sees us and not how we see ourselves.
What would you say about we're looking at the amount of stress that young people go through today, whether it's their school, their college, pressures and stresses from their parents, and then they get over past teenage years into their 20s, they get into a working environment, more pressure, more stress, you get a family life, you get wife, you got children, you got a husband, even more stress. People seem to find difficult ways of coping with so much pressures in today's society. What sort of advice can you give to them today?
One thing that Jesus said is this, and this is a truth that never changes, and it's a truth that, in all honesty, something that I'm still, I thought, you know, I was good at this, but now I realize I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Jesus said it as simple as this. He said, do not worry like the heathen do. He was saying that because it's almost like me saying to my iPhone, hey iPhone, I need you to make some toast. My iPhone can't do that because it wasn't built to do that. The designer knows what it made the iPhone for. If I told my iPhone not to do something that it was built for, it's capable of doing it. In the same way, God created us. And if he said, do not worry, that means he knows that we were designed, we're capable of worrying, but we also have the capability to switch off worry as well, and anxiety. You see, worry is a choice. That's what he's showing us. It's not something that, and unfortunately, if we don't choose to do the opposite of worry, we will automatically default into worry. It's like gravity. We're just going to fall into it naturally. Jesus said, do not worry. Another place in the Bible says this. It says, therefore labor that you might enter into your rest. This is interesting. It literally says, work hard at resting. You know, something I always tell Christians is we're not made to work hard and then get tired and rest. God made us on the 6th day, so the first day, our first day, which would be the 7th day, would be our day of rest. God didn't make us to work hard to exasperate it, then we rest. He made us to work from a place of rest. And if you're not rested on the inside, if you haven't practiced the art of his presence, be still and know that I'm God. How many times do you hear that people actually switch off the world, switch off their mobile phones, switch off everything, go into a room by themselves and just lie still in the presence of God and think about the goodness of God? Yeah. He said, those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. But before that, it says a devastating thing will happen. It says even young people will give up strength. Even the young, even the strength of the youth, let alone the adults, what hope do they have? He said, even young will give up strength, but those that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. So there's strength in the presence of God. But what we don't realize is in the midst of everything that we've got to do, it would be foolish, though my iPhone has so many functions, communication, camera, play music, so many functions, it would be foolish of my phone to think it doesn't need the source, that it doesn't need to be plugged in and recharged. In the same way, we as believers run around family duties. I mean, I've got a wife and kid, so it gets busy. I've got ministry to run. I've got business to run. We get so preoccupied and so heavy, but we don't spend the time we need to recharge.
One of the things that's on my heart so strongly for the young generation is a word the Lord gave me. Two of the greatest days that will ever happen in your life is the day, first of all, you give your life to Christ. The second most important day in your life is the day you come to yourself. Mm-hmm. And you see, the prodigal son, when you look at his story in the Bible, he had a father. He knew his father, but he didn't really know himself. Mm. And he leaves his father's house, and then there's this finite scripture that's so profound that I've never really heard a teacher teach on it. It says, and when he came to himself. And I think our generation has the same addictions as a previous generation. We just have a lot more of it. It's an addiction to not wanting to come to yourself. Because the day you switch off your mobile phone, I mean, there will be panic for that first few minutes, because all of a sudden you will hear the person that you've been running away from all this time, which has always been you. And I think young people are running away from themselves. I think that it's difficult for God to find somebody who hasn't even found themselves. And so that switch off point, that disconnect point, often happens at nighttime when there's nobody there to talk to them, or there's no Beats headphones in their ears. That's the time where we're at most at one with ourselves. And yet we're suffering with a generation that doesn't sleep at night anymore. It's full of sleep deprivation, insomnia, all of those things, because there's a fear of self. There's a fear of realizing how bankrupt we truly are when we switch off, when all of these things are flooding our lives and distracting us from the reality that there's a hole and a void that a generation is trying to fill that can only ever be filled with God.
Yeah.
I think it's just so key what you've just said there. There is a hole, there is something there that maybe non-Christians out there might, or new Christians might feel, that there's an emptiness maybe that they're feeling, and they're not sure quite what it is. They're looking at their next door neighbours with bigger cars and bigger houses. They get their bigger house, they get their bigger car, but that hole still isn't being filled. And I guess the only way you can explain it is when you find Christ. Christ really does help to fill that hole. Now, guys, you're from the millennial generation, okay? You guys are young, you're hip, you're cool. Look at you guys on there. Okay, so you guys, you're with it. You see what's going on in the social media today. You see what the pressures and strains of these young people are. You guys are pastors as well. How are you using your experiences to reach out to the youth?
Well, actually, social media-wise, I would say social media is obviously an effective form of communication. And in all honesty, I'm waiting for the day where people have cables attached to their bodies and they can literally plug into a computer and they can live in a virtual world, because it just seems like the whole world is now online, and people are trying to buy online real estate. People are trying to take up space online because it's like that's the way the world is moving. And if that's where people are plugging their brains into, it's also the greatest opportunity for evangelization of the world like we've never known before. I mean, years ago, if you had said this gospel shall be preached to the whole world, in Jesus' days, you'll wonder how, with just your legs and a donkey, you're going to get to the entire world. And now with the internet being so quick, with Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, every kind of social media you can imagine, there is always a way to evangelize, both socially, where people can see your lifestyle. And I like social evangelism. People get to see, sometimes I'll throw on a Snapchat or something on Instagram, and people get to see a snippet, though it's not the whole thing, a snippet into our life while we're traveling on the road, or how we deal with our child. And people are constantly asking questions. My wife is also a vlogger with thousands of followers, and so people get to see her lifestyle. She gets to teach through that. My brother runs a 5 a.m. prayer line that's attracted both the saved world and the unsaved world, because people are just hungry for the presence of God. So the internet has, for its many woes, it's also got many blessings. It's a double-edged sword. It's given us a great opportunity to reach a world we may never meet. And it's also opened doors for us to reach across the world and travel across the world in ways that we've not known, just because somebody saw us on Instagram. So
Wow.
it's just the way the world's going. Things are changing.
Tell us what you guys up to at the moment of time. I hear you're planting some churches. Is that right? Give us a little insight into that.
So my brother's planted a church in Stratford
And in America.
and
We've got in Argentina.
and in Argentina
And
Wow.
India now.
and India.
They all open at the same time, again through social media, which is
Really? I mean, to explain that process. Are you familiar with the Argentina? Are you familiar with
So
India?
basically, one day God spoke to a woman who in America. God told me, He said, "I'm going to give you many churches, not just the one." And I said, "God, how's this going to be?" Because we planted churches in the past, but it was a real laborious process. But social media made it quick. People got to know about. Someone got to know about my spiritual covering. And basically, God said to this woman, "Go on Facebook." This is the weirdest thing. She jumps on Facebook. She goes to my spiritual coverings website, and then she sees a picture of me. And God says, "I want you to call this man on Facebook. He has a prophetic word for you." And that morning, I had a word going on in my spirit, but I didn't know who it was for. And all of a sudden, while I'm in the cafe, this random person calls me on Facebook. And she says, "This is going to sound really weird. I'm from Ohio, USA, but God said that you got a word for me." I said, "I do have a word." And I delivered this word that I had, and it was so forensic, dealing with so many details in her life, that it was really a God moment. And then afterwards, through a process of building relationship, they really discovered that God had called them to start a church. But they said, "Would you be our apostolic covering? Would you bless what we do?" And I said, 100%, yes, I'm in. We're already starting churches, so they've come along and part of the leadership. So they are running the America. I'm actually flying out to America in July. They're running Light City, Ohio, USA. And in the meantime, they also managed to get in contact with other leaders who are plugging in as well. So it looks like the beginning of a network that's being built.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, give us an idea of what does it take to plant that church and the process, and how you'll be involved in that whole process as well.
See, I was there in the delivery room with my wife for the first time when she delivered our baby, and it was the scariest experience of my life. And the only experience that I could come close to relating that to is planting a church. It's laborious, it's painful. Churches aren't just planted, they're birthed. Some people think that you just go somewhere, you just set up a church, get a few people in, and you go home. And that's not really it. You are birthing this thing on your knees before God. You suddenly have to become married to the land that you're in. You have to be in love with the land, in love with the people. So it took a long time. God, where should I plant? I had two places in mind, King's Cross or Stratford. And then finally the Spirit of God said, "I want you to plant over here in Stratford." And it was the moment you always know when you've hit miracle ground, because it has knock-on effect. God started opening these doors to other churches the moment I took that step of obedience. The other churches started opening up. But it's laborious. You have to love the land. There's a lot of time spent training. Vulnerability is huge because you're building relationship. Whereas before, both me and my brother traveled a whole lot. Now we have to see the same. When you travel, you can insult everyone and go home. They'll never know where you live. But when you see them every single Sunday, you have to
Hold your tongue.
be patient. Work with them, grow them. They don't believe you sleep. They call you all hours of the night. They don't believe you eat.
You build boundaries.
But you build
relationships.
effective boundaries with time.
Absolutely.
And
planting churches, there's a great joy in it when you accept it.
Yeah.
I mean, people think that the call of a pastor is difficult. Actually, I think God gives you a grace to be a pastor. And I've never assumed to be a pastor. I've always moved very much apostolically. But I mean, we do pastor for seasons, as God would have us. When you plant a church, you do pastor for a season.
Yeah.
Now, I have the privilege of working with Dr. Sharon Stone, who's our spiritual mother, in Windsor, Berkshire, where we planted a church. It's just started in January, and already, I mean, we're at full capacity, and it's only been a couple of months, and we're already bursting at the seams. In fact, on Sunday, we just didn't have any space left to host it, and all the chairs had run out. And so we even started looking at how we're going to open up the overflow section to take more people. So God is, I think the reason why church planting has been so successful, and we planted probably about 13 to 15 churches. This will be our 20th, I guess, we're coming to.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why it's been so successful is because, you know, the Bible says, except the Lord builds the city, the builders build in vain. We just want to build what God's building.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we ever wanted to start a church for the sake of starting a church. Neither are we. I mean, I don't think there's an ambitious bone in our body. You know, we're not out to get the biggest church in the city. We're not out to get the most numbers into a building. No, we want to build something that creates lasting impact. And I think the church has almost become a museum, whereas it's supposed to be a movement. And our heart is to take the church from museum to movement.
Yeah.
To a place where it's impacting, transforming, and being a good representation of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Now, if viewers want any more information about your churches, the locations and everything, how can they contact you guys?
If you want to connect with our church, it's www.mychurchwindsor.com. And so my brother's church.
And the church I run is www.lightlondon.org. Church is called Light London. The entire group is Light City, but the church that I'm at in London is called lightlondon.org.
Tobi and Tomi, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Thank you so much for being so inspirational as well. May God bless you both.
Thank you.